Good evening. Oh, we can do a little better than that. Good evening. All right, that's a Karamu welcome. I am Nina Domingue. I'm the Associate Artistic Director here at Karamu, welcoming you to the Anisfield-Wolf Book Awards. Karamu is a Swahili word, meaning a place of joyful gathering. And in case you did not know, Karamu is 108 years old. We are yes, clap for that. We are the oldest producing Black theater in America. Yes. Ashe. You are looking at the beautiful set of Clydes, our season opener, Clydes by Lynn Nottage. It runs now through October the 15th. There are postcards and information in the lobby. Please get your ticket and come see this show. It is hilarious and amazing. In fact, when you go outside in the lobby and you look at those stand-up beautiful shelves, they have all sorts of information about Karamu, how to become a member, information about our arts education classes, which started this week, and they're for adults and children. You can register all the way through the 9th. And y'all didn't come here to hear me. So I'm going to introduce Mr. Zachary Thomas, our MC for the evening. You can join me on the stage.
Thank you, Nina. How's that? All right, awesome. My name is Zachary Thomas. I'm the Executive Director of Writers in Residence. I'm really happy to be here with you all this evening. Similar to Karamu House, a group of John Carroll undergraduates started Writers in Residence 5 years ago. They wanted to teach creative writing to youth who are incarcerated to empower their voices and assist in their reentry into society. During that time, we served 1,000 residents and over 300 workshops at 15 different facilities throughout Ohio. In fact, Keisha Nicole Foster, the 2019 winner of the Cleveland Arts Prize for Literature, is at the Cuyahoga County Juvenile Detention right now, right down the street, teaching a group of teenage boys how their community shapes and molds their identity. Tonight, the 2023 recipient of the Cleveland Arts Prize for Poetry will read from her debut collection, On Two Dogs. In it, she empowers her culture, her country, and herself. And as readers, we laugh and cry on a lyrical journey about physical and colonial sovereignty. Please welcome Stephanie Janese.
Thank you. What an introduction. How's everybody doing tonight? Hey, it is such an honor to read on this stage at the historical Karamu House. I do not take this lightly. I'll read 2 poems from my collection, On Two Dogs, and then I'll leave you with a new piece from my newest collection. And I'll get out of your way so you can make way for the poet of the hour. This first poem is called Prayer to Alleviate Shame. Body, first capital, and I have bartered it. O God, O trined mother, I have spent it. Story awash in the stench of what feeds me, I am not what I have done to get here. Body, trusted compass. Somehow we have always made it out alive. And isn't that what this miraculous shroud was fashioned for, this dazzling machine? Allow me to test the limits of what the senses can take. I'm starting to unravel my obsession with what carries us upright, entangled. A bullet sails past the third moon, and I claw rivers into my body, unholiest of muses. Each breath that escapes is its own penance. Thank you. This collection focuses on themes of colonialism, Puerto Rican nationalism, and the birth control pill trials and sterilization that took place in Puerto Rico during the 50s and 60s. So if you don't know about that, you should. Google it. Or you can buy my book, which hopefully will still inspire you to Google it. This is the last poem of the book. It's called Second Birth. Newly emerged from the mother wound of God, Little body carries self through a threshold of barbed edges. Little body does not ask for much besides a warm bed and some puff. Small thing, precious and forgiving is most selfless at night. Opening for anything that might stay long enough to see, little body can do tricks. Turn slither and beast with a flash of bone tooth when it meets the flesh, just so. What filth little body is capable of. Replace filth with healing, for here they mean the same. Self does not ask for much besides the freedom to talk of the dark and some respect on her name. Self was made into a little fire by creator spirits who say bitch with their fangs and spend their vacant hours smoking cigarettes held by claws red as warning. Self and little body meld together, create I. As an I am as resilient as a crucifix. I have never belonged to anything but the moon or the ghosts of my sisters, who are not really my sisters, but what I mean is understood. I want to smoke cigarettes religiously, as in I am willing to tar my throat for the sake of worship, though I don't like going to the doctor or I don't have health insurance. Both are true, so my rowdiest hole stays supple and unfixed. Anyway, back to the story about what I owe my life to. Really, it's all of this. A council of girl mothers who answer prayers faster than any man god the foolish can claim. However, do not be misled. It isn't always this way. They do not wake every day tied to their survival. Sometimes, when the problems are away, the council sighs, each of them lighting a harmless cigarette, kicking their well-walked shoes off, a bloodbath of their favorite songs melting from the window, the whole time laughing like dogs. Thank you. And for my last trick, I'm just kidding. I'll read a poem from my new collection, which ironically deals a lot with women of color and labor and the Midwest and the diaspora, so it feels pretty fitting to be in like a kitchen space right now. This poem is called 32nd Street. It is the late 90s and everyone is still alive, and this is what I mean when I say take me back. And like fuck a weekend in Miami, I mean take me back to the days before death came and did a street sweep. I mean, who did we wrong to curse us like this? And anyway, we were just kids on porches stuck in the smooth of summer or on bikes all explorer type traversing parts of the city our parents couldn't find out about. I mean, we spent most afternoons at the Quick Mart on the corner scraping a few dollars together for some honey barbecue twists and coconut sodas. Or at the park on the other side of the block watching basketballs and the boys that dribbled them flit along the sticky courts, hoping the chip crisp twists of our baby curls and the glisten of freshly Carmex lips would be enough to seduce the one with the lineup of a demigod. And the park was so full of life back then, with all the Kool-Aid lipped kids hanging from the monkey bars, and the little custom Hondas with the subs competing to be the supplier of this afternoon's soundtrack. Between trumpets crying out for a home they could not afford to return to, and the hollow drums fighting to stay heard over the rumble of hungry bellies. And yet the loudest sound in attendance was laughter, until it wasn't. I mean, take me back to the days when she was still here, and 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 she was still here. I mean, why everybody I love gotta be so good at becoming ghosts? I mean, if I could just stand on the corner of this poem forever, I would. Thank you.
Let's keep that round of applause going, please. Very good transition to our next reader. This next author wrote a book that reminded me personally why I started to write almost 10 years ago, to make sense of dying, death, and the disappearance of a familiar reality. In an interview with Culver Coleman, he described grief as something almost radical, almost queer, because it says, I don't care that you're supposed to move on. Here I am. You're going to have to acknowledge me. And in Alive at the End of the World, He looks at grief face to face, using poetry to create a new emotional vocabulary that honors victims, comics, singers, writers, and himself. Please welcome the 2023 Anisfield-Wolf Book Award winner for poetry, Saeed Jones.
Hello, good evening. Wow, y'all are beautiful. This place is beautiful, and then to have a sense of the history that made this place possible, it makes sense. It feels right. Cleveland, it is so good to be here. I moved to Ohio in 2019, and then what happened, and so I've done several events with institutions in Cleveland, but of course it all happened with me staring at a screen. And so this is my first time here, and I didn't plan it this way, but I think it's a pretty good occasion. I'll take it. I'll make it work. But I'm honored for all of the work. It's community and arts in our communities. It requires many stars and planets aligning, and so I'm sure there's so much I don't know, but I want to say thank you, because I know so much hidden work has to happen in order for these moments, and these moments are important for all of us. Thanks, yeah. It's not all downhill from here, but the world ends from here. So let's get our claps in while we can. So I'm going to read from my book, Alive at the End of the World, which I published this past fall. And the paradox is in the title. With these poems, I was especially interested, though, in the way in which, this living stuff is pretty hard. As it turns out, it actually, I think, only becomes more difficult the more compassionate and wise you come. The more you love, the more is at stake all of a sudden. You're like, oh, it's much easier when I was a young asshole. Oh, now I care about people, and I've got things to lose, right? And so you're doing all of that anyway. But of course, we're here. We're doing it in a context. And so I was interested with this book in trying to capture, using my own experiences, kind of drawing from memoir and autobiography, what it means to feel like, listen, I've got my own personal grief. There are a lot of ghosts tucked inside this body. And frankly, it's hard enough just kind of acknowledging that, because as Zachary pointed out, grief is a trickster. Grief shows up and goes, wouldn't it be funny if I never left? That's what grief does. Grief says, I'm not your roommate, I'm your landlord. And so you're doing all of that, but you're also an immigrant. You're also disabled. You're also trans, non-binary. This is your second language. You don't have health care. So you're dealing with personal griefs while you're being assaulted by systemic betrayals. Mm-hmm. And, you can take that all the way to the collective of climate boil. You know what I mean? So that's the party we're about to have. And so since this book is so much about grief, I got interested in this idea of grief is like this, it's a very intense relationship, but it is kind of weirdly one-sided. The other person usually isn't talking to you. And then when they do, it's weird. So I was like, well, let's start on the other side. And so this is kind of a zombie poem. A memory. When they finished burying me, what was left of me sent up a demand, a hand blooming in the fresh dirt. When I'm back, I want a body like a slash of lightning. If they heard me, I couldn't hear their answers. But silence has never stopped me from praying. Alive, how many nights did I spend knelt between the knees of gods and men, begging for rain, rent, and reasons to remain? A body like the sky seeking justice. A body like light reaching right down into the field where you thought you could hide from me. They've taken their bald rose stems and black umbrellas home now. They cook for one another and pretend every bite isn't salted with ash. When they sleep, if they sleep, they hold themselves tight as cadavers. They dream of dirt, and dirt renames me memory. But history has never stopped me from praying. So there are several poems in the book. I'm glad we get to have a conversation. I can talk about this later. But I was interested in structure and how I could manifest that. So there are several poems in the book that are numbered griefs, because of course, if you're able to live well enough, you're going to grieve quite a bit. Yeah? And so this is grief number 913. And I wrote it in a city named after Christopher Columbus. I grieve the boy I killed and the country fashioned out of his bloodstains. I grieve that it was so easy. The knife, lazy and confident, invading him. This is what love feels like. I grieve that he believed me. Dumb animal, doe-eyed, ready-made gift. Just another border outlined in barbed wire and crime scene chalk. I grieve that, even then, I already knew. I'd do it again, 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 again. I grieve a continent. Nations united by the way terror turns me on. The hot instant between thrust and gasp. I want you, and I had you. Again, 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 I grieve my face onto the covers of history books. I grieve the descendants, dumb animals, dead-eyed, ready-made gifts. This is what love requires. I grieve that they believed me. Listen, I'm black. You don't always have to clap, and oomph will do it sometimes. You know what I mean? I get it. You're like, how the fuck am I supposed to clap for colonization? I don't know, you know. This will be the funniest reading about the end of the world you've ever been to. I don't know how many you've been to. So I wasn't planning on reading this, but it just feels in rhythm with so much, particularly that Stephanie was bringing to mind. I thought a lot about the pandemic on how I found myself earnestly, privately, leaning on black art, because I'm black and I love black art. It's great, right? But I was leaning on it and just it would get me through the day. I was like, maybe we shouldn't listen to Nina Simone Baltimore on repeat, Saeed, but I do it anyway. You know what I mean? Maybe I shouldn't listen to Ike Tina all day and then wonder why I'm crying. But I do it. And so I started thinking about the ways in which these songs, these comics, these poets, these actors, their artistry, America loves to be so proud of black art, as it steals from the black artist, and what does it mean to be, somewhere in that? So this isn't based on anyone specifically, it's more a collective history. But I will say, Tina Turner's relationship to Ike was certainly on mind when working on this. It was lockdown, so, baby had a lot of free time, she got creative. So this poem takes up the entire page and it's one sentence. So let's do this together. A song for the status quo. The history of music in America is a sample of the sound of a woman sobbing that reminds me of a lie a man told me about myself once. While a song I thought I loved played on the radio, and stay with me now, listeners, the song is a cover of a cover, and the woman who wrote the original version never got a dime for her work and died poor doomed to haunt dusty, unread liner notes until the end of time. Because a white man stole the song from the black man she gave the song to as an act of what she thought was love, but of course was devotion, which, as many but not nearly enough of us now understand, is often mistaken for love, but is actually more akin to unpaid labor, which is really a kind of slavery, though I try to avoid calling things that aren't actually slavery. Because most days, accuracy is all I have left. And anyway, I'm losing my train of thought the way that woman lost money she never had, but was certainly owed, and I'm sitting in a rented red Corvette. And it's getting late. And I'm lonely, but not alone. And I'll be damned if the cover of the song isn't playing on the radio right now, and it sounds like an up-tempo jam about dancing until dawn burns the night away, which is really a metaphor for ruining a mattress with the smell of good and possibly great sex. But also the mattress is us, and the ruin is us, and the sex is us, and the smell is us, and I guess the good is us too, but I don't believe in greatness anymore. Because glory isn't possible in an America where the cover of a song that ruined a black woman's life can reach me through the radio and feel like romance, or hope, or a reason to reach over and squeeze the thigh of a man more likely to crash the car and kill us both than tell me he loves me and mean it. And the funniest thing about those two poems is I write them in the context of assuming that's before the world ends. Y'all ready? So one of the things, again, I tried to capture, and I guess the misstructure of the book is a defining element of our lives now is the violence of repetition. Someone comes to you in the break room at work. Oh my God, did you hear about the cop shot a brother in the back? Which one? Oh my God, did you hear about that school which one? Another state an abortion ban. Where? You start, it's really maddening, right? And you laugh. I mean, I think really this humor that I'm bringing, I'm not forcing it. I think it's that you're laughing to keep from crying because you begin to feel like you're being punished for paying attention at times. And so I'm going to read a few poems that all have the same title because I wanted to at least nod to that, like that feeling when you're like, wait, wasn't there already a poem with, what did we, Alive at the end of the world. The end of the world was mistaken for just another midday massacre in America. Brain matter and broken glass, blurred boot prints and pools of blood. We dialed the newly dead, but they wouldn't answer. We texted, begging them to call us back, but the newly dead don't know how to read. In America, a gathering of people is called target practice or a funeral, depending on who lives long enough to define the terms. But for now, we are alive at the end of the world, shell-shocked by headlines and alarm clocks, burning through what little love we have left. With time, the white boys with guns will become wounds we won't even remember enduring. How did you get that scar on your shoulder? Oh, a boy I barely knew with sad ones. My first book, Prelude to Bruise, is it's a bit of a coming-of-age story where I create a fictional avatar. He's grown throughout most of the books, but I just refer to him as boy because isn't that what America loves to do to black men? And so I thought with this one, we would just check in on boy and see how he's doing. Not well. So if you read Prelude to Bruise, this is a nod to him. Just imagine him in his 50s and 60s, just out here struggling like the rest of us. Alive at the end of the world. The world ends and I make a dress out of the names I live to inflict on myself. Painful to put the dress on, even more painful to take it off. I banish the dress to my closet as long as my body can bear. The world ends again. So I drag the dress out, bandage myself back into the truth of beauty. A bejeweled bodice of screams, tight waist of wasted bullets. The train leaves bruises everywhere I walk. Neighbors call me a disaster when the world ends. This is what it means to be a man in pain, naked in the middle of the street. Alive at the end of the world. The end of the world loved us like a father who bragged about the broken roof he kept overhead whenever we'd complain about the night air watching us sleep, or whenever we'd wince at his reach. The end of the world would shout, "I made that roof. What have you made?" Nothing but tears. Nothing but waste. Chairs and coffee mugs came at us like asteroids. "We're sorry," we'd lie. "No one loves us like you love us," we'd hiss. From hiding places we treated like siblings. Crying alone in the kitchen he had just ruined, the end of the world would scream, "You're gonna miss me when I'm gone." As if a man has to die to haunt his children. As if we didn't already daydream about the wood grain of his coffin, the threadbare suit we couldn't wait to see his body stuffed into, the hymns we'd stutter through, off key, on purpose, knowing damn well that the end of the world's ghost was mean as spit and already on its way. Thank you. So I was talking to Stephanie about this. I think there's a twinship, a sibling relationship between poetry and comedy that I've been living my way into, and I need to start paying more attention to. Something's going on there. And so this was May of 2021. I loved Paul Mooney. I loved his work. Well, I didn't love him. I didn't know him, but I loved his work. I just thought he had a terrifying mind. And I knew that. But then when he died, and I wonder if you've had these experiences with celebrities. It's not like they're neighbors or family members, right? Maybe you got to go see, a concert at some point. You know what I mean? You didn't have, but then you get the news notification or someone, and you're not sad. You're devastated. You're devastated about this person you didn't know. And I just think that's actually like a really interesting experience. I find people are often embarrassed about it. Right? You're trying to play it off, and I'm like, I don't know. If Prince meant a lot to you, Prince meant a lot to you. And let's sit with that. I think it's okay, And so Paul Mooney died, and I just sat down. I don't have many poems like this, but I just sat down and wrote this poem that afternoon. All I gotta do is stay black and die. Paul Mooney's heart stopped this morning in Oakland, and the night Whitney Houston died, the national anthem shot itself in the throat. I fell asleep watching Aretha's funeral, and when I woke up, she was somehow still dead. Somehow I keep losing people who would never really mind. Diane Carroll died, and I walked into my bedroom closet looking for a mink coat I don't have, and pearl necklaces I will never own because I missed them already. Luther, are there closets in heaven? Little Richard, if you stand in a closet and scream loud enough for white people to steal your sound, is it really a closet? I should have kissed you when I had the chance. I think Cicely Tyson left because she knew how this song was going to end and didn't want to hear it. I think Maya is still somewhere correcting what people call her. I think Toni Morrison always knew it's not the death that hurts, it's the dying. Thank you. And so that poem came pretty fast, and it was such an honor to be able to like kind of on the page like acknowledge what it feels like, you know, whether, if not grief, memory, you see something, you smell a perfume, and it just, a deluge kind of happens in your mind, you know? And so I decided then to write a poem for all of the people mentioned in that poem. I'm not going to read them all, but in the order that they appear in the poem, and so I'm gonna skip around. I don't have the energy for the Paul Moody poem tonight. Woo. If you read it, you know what I mean. Had to be there. But I'll read a few. This is the poem inspired by Whitney. Oh my goodness, what a heartbreak! What a hard love we had with Whitney Houston, and what a hard love she had. She fell in love with a young woman named Robin Crawford when they met during a summer job in Newark, New Jersey. They were 16. And they were a part of each other's life for the rest of Whitney's life, of Nippy's life. Robin wrote a beautiful memoir and published it a few years ago. It's called A Song for You, My Life with Whitney Houston. I would encourage you to read it. But in the book, she said something at one point that I was like, I'm already heartbroken, Robin. Take it easy on me. She pointed out that the last voice message she got from Whitney, she accidentally deleted. She heard just like the beginning and then hit the wrong, and then gone. And you know, when you're grieving people, there are all these little things. I remember, you know, a year after my mom passed away, I remember losing that phone. It was before we had the cloud. And it was like a few days, I was already pissed I lost my phone. Actually, I got it pickpocketed in Barcelona. Anyway, I'm a Sagittarius. That explains that. But a few days later, I'm already irritated thinking how inconvenient it is, and then I realize, oh my gosh, all my mom's text, any voice and so that's part of it. And so I wanted to acknowledge this moment between the two of them. Deleted voice message, hey Robin, it's me, Whitney. I keep waking up a new color of lonely, exhausted from runs across bridges through storms in my sleep. That's nothing but the devil, Mama chimes. Should have known, the chorus. I run to you even when I stand spotlit on stage. A false wind chants Whitney instead of my name. Robin, I don't know what's worse. Trying to wrap my warmth around yours, then realizing I'm still in bed with him. Or reaching for you in the dark and only being held by darkness. Tell no one, not even me. But I hear a silence dragging its chains. And baby, I know better than most. You can't outrun a sound. And there's actually a documentary about Whitney. I believe it came out in 2018. Her mother doesn't come across great. I'll say that. And so those quotes, that's actually audio of Cicely Tyson responding kind of coldly to Whitney talking about nightmares she had been having earlier in her life. Okay, let's bring it up. Not really. We're just going to stay down here. So one of the things I'm interested in, again, like grief, you know, this sense of apocalypse. You know, I'm reading this book about the sisterhood. It's by Courtney Thurston, and it's about the group of black women writers, Toni Cade Bambara, Toni Morrison, who were all gathering in the 70s, and Audre Lorde and others. And Audre said, revolution is not a one-time event. And I think that's true with a lot of experiences, grief, right? And it's not just one. It's not going to be like Independence Day and we all hold hands and watch it. No, unfortunately, it's a phenomenon that you might experienced several times. And so to kind of honor that again formally, even when you're in the notes of my book, chaos still reigns. You're not done yet. And so I thought I would read, instead of the poem, I would read the footnote about Little Richard, because I realized as I was talking to Steph, we were having a good time. That was the best green room chat ever. Green room girlfriends for life. Yes. That I was like, oh my gosh, the Rock and Roll Hall of Fame is here. And I know they had some interesting news of late that actually feels pretty relevant, huh? Ain't that funny? What does Colson Whitehead say? Colson Whitehead was doing an interview. What does my friend Colson say? He was like, it's really funny. If you write about police brutality at any point, you always be on time. He was like, I didn't write the Nickel Boys knowing that George Floyd would be murdered the day after they finished the book. I was just writing, what felt right. Isn't that crazy? Okay, Little Richard listens to Pat Boone sing Tutti Frutti. That's the poem. You can read it later. When you buy the book, that's out front for sale by those lovely folks. Was inspired by the rage behind Little Richard's iconic screams. In America, one way to suffer a death before you die is to mean so much to so many people for so many different reasons. It's not just that we could hear James Brown's shouts and Little Richard's screams, or see Prince's ass and Little Richard's curves. It's that Bob Dylan wrote in his high school yearbook that his life's ambition was to, quote, join Little Richard. It's that Pat Boone watered down and added bleach to Tutti Frutti, and it was a bigger hit than Little Richard's original version. It's that Pat Boone did it again with Long Tall Sally. Is that because of a shitty contract Little Richard signed, he only made half a cent for every record of Tutti Frutti that was sold. It's that, for Little Richard, selling more than 500,000 copies of Tutti Frutti amounted to a mere $25,000 in his bank account. It's that when Little Richard said, quote, if Elvis is the king of rock and roll, I'm the queen, he wasn't being cute or sassy. He was correcting the historical record and demanding equity that he never received. In America, one way to suffer a death before you die is for people to applaud you, even as they steal from you. In America, one way to suffer a death before you die is to be an inspiration to white male rock stars. There should be catacombs under the Rock and Roll Hall of Fame. Little Richard alone would account for at least a dozen tombs. Thank you. Now, I have no sense of time. It's not like 11 p.m., is it? Oh, cute. Okay, I'll read a few more poems. You gotta check. You've got to check. If you're doing your job well, I think you just fully lose sense of reality briefly. Okay. I have to. I'll read a poem that's difficult for me. My mother raised me as a single parent, heroically. In May of 2011, she had a heart attack the night before Mother's Day. A little dramatic, Mom, but that was my apocalypse. I've written about her. I hope I've done right by her. But, you're never quite sure. You always kind of go, grief doesn't leave, it's the landlord. And so as I was working on this book, I know you shouldn't say this, but I was delighted to be writing about the apocalypse. It's a very fruitful subject matter. There's a lot to talk about. And I just remember after going through a period of lockdown where I was so worn out by the pandemic, I couldn't read. I had to retrain myself how to read because my attention was shot. I used, as a tool, I recommend, hourglasses. So I'd be like, read for 5 minutes, read for 15 minutes, and I built myself up to 45 minutes, So when I got to the point that ideas were coming, I was just like, yes, this is the best apocalypse ever, oh my gosh. And then grief, as it turns out, is just stitched. Obviously, y'all didn't notice it? You didn't notice that, Saeed? It's right there, but I didn't notice it until I wrote this poem. Saeed, how dare you make your mother into a prelude? And then night neons itself inside me. And I begin missing you in loud, new ways. The sky burns itself bright, then bruises black. Things fall from the sky. And those things might be water, but could just as well be boys, or bombs, or billionaires, or birds. Honestly, between your death and me, it doesn't matter. Or I don't know. Or I wasn't looking. Or I can't see, because I've made a home out of how much I miss you. And there's no one here to tell me I should leave. Alone and night neoned, I write, read, drink, drug, grieve, and all America keeps teaching me is that there are so many ways to die in America. Which frankly is quite confusing because this country killed you a decade ago. And I'm still writing, reading, drinking, drugging, grieving, binging, blacking out in the cozy, claustrophobic home I've made out of how very, very much I miss you. And the sky keeps throwing down consequences and corrections and histories and nations. I mean, come on. Who can blame me for not wanting to go back outside? You? A whole decade ghosted, grounded, and ground down into unreliable memories, dollar word metaphors? No, not you. Mother as mortar and pestle. Mother as son mangling meaning out of his mother's misfortune. Mother as second draft, sorry. But it's awfully true. You are prelude, and your progeny, loud and unrelenting, has to live on as your last sentence, uncompleted. And then the next morning, I sat back down at my desk. It was like, what did you write? Are you, huh? You know, oh my gosh. It wasn't even like I'd published it yet, just alone. I was, because I think, and this is white people look away. Okay, black people come close. We grieve pretty well, relatively speaking. It's a low bar in America. But I think if any culture that I know well in the American culture, I'd say black people, we do it pretty well. Homegoings. That said, I do think there is a kind of rigor to our collective relationship to grief. There's a certain sense of hold your head up high. Be grateful that person was in your life. Walk forward with dignity. Grieve fairly politely. You can lose your entire mind at the funeral. You are absolutely allowed, right? Like, no one will fall. But like 6 months on, a year on, you need to get back to the path. That's true for us. That's even more true in American culture, and I think it's about capitalism, right? And so I just woke, and I just was so embarrassed, even in the privacy of my own home. If anyone knows about the freedom of the page, I do, and I still freaked myself out. And I decided for once, instead of running away from it, because I'm actually pretty risk averse, if you can believe it, I decided to try to build that again into the structure of the book. So you turn the page. First of all, that poem's on its side, so I'm trying, if you can't get it, I'm shook too, is what I'm basically trying to say. We're all shook. You're shook, I'm shook, we're all shaking. But you turn the book right on its side, and I was like, yeah, things don't go back to normal. So instead of there being a poem, you see a footnote. Saeed wonders if the poem you just read would have been better served by a different title. I'll give you something to cry about. Or After Carol Sweet Jones. Or After Redacted for the sake of the subject's privacy. Or a decade into grief, Saeed gets lost in the fog between candor and shamelessness. Or if you cry hard enough, any grief can be the end of the world. Or Saeed wonders if he or his mother is the protagonist. Jury's still out. Or Alive at the End of the World. Or did I just trick myself into writing another memoir? Or In This America. How can I call myself a good son in which my mother, a black woman, was still here? Okay, I'm going to read one more poem, and then I'm chatting. Are we chatting? We're chatting? We're chatting. Okay, I love a chat. This is an Alive at the End of the World poem. Okay, I have to say this. I wrote this, again, kind of to Colson Whitehead's insight. I wrote this thinking about the Pulse nightclub shooting, which happened June of 2016. That was Pride Month, by the way. A lot was going on. A lot went on in 2016. Remember that? 49 people. The number still knocks me low, right? And that's just the people we lost. The survivors, the victims, their loved ones. I mean, just it's so much, and it just felt like a blip on the radar. So I wanted to honor them, and so I wrote this in 2021, and then this book had not been out for 2 months before the shooting in Colorado Springs at Q nightclub happened, a very similar circumstance. And that's why what Colson said just really resonates. There's something there. It's like when maybe this is the point of this prize, when you're really trying to write to the truth of America as you experience, there's a resonance that I think it startles you. You know, you're like, I wasn't trying to do all that. I was just trying to tell the truth as best I can. But also, I love nightclubs. I do think they're important spaces. Music, art, laughter, fashion, all of that is important. And there is a reason why they're charming for our churches, our books, our nightclubs, our drag shows, our story hours. There's a reason. They know how essential it is to our humanity. And so we must protect these spaces. Thank you. Alive at the End of the World. The end of the world was a nightclub. Drag queens with machetes and rhinestoned machine guns guarded the red and impassable door on Friday nights. Just to look at the crowd, all dressed up and swaying outside, it made people want to yell the truth about themselves to anyone who'd listen. But no one heard. The end of the world was loud. The end of the world leaked music like radiation. And we loved the neon echo, even though it taunted us. Or maybe because it taunted us. Kids leaning out of windows hours after bedtime. Cab drivers debating fares at the curb just for an excuse to linger. Pastors who'd pause at the corner and vow that if they ever got inside, they'd burn it all down. Thank you. Thank you.
You can keep going, you can keep going. So I have a few questions, but if you have a question in between, I'll make sure to call you out. Just raise your hand. We probably are intimate enough where you can shout out and we can hear you.
Oh, we can repeat it.
And we can repeat it too, yeah, of course. Saeed, thank you so much for being here. Thank you for the reading as well.
Thank you.
I'm going to jump right in if that's okay. So if the end of the world is now, can you tell us a little bit about what you're letting go and what you're hanging on to?
What am I letting go? What am I hanging? Okay, yeah, you were all right. It is. I've been traveling. I forgot. We're back in the Midwest where people actually might actually tell you the truth. Be careful. Look out. They don't do this in Massachusetts. You know what I mean? What am I letting go? I've never been an especially nostalgic person. Doesn't seem especially healthy for a Black queer person. But I think even feeling that way before, I think, and that's why I like that poem's titled A Song for the Status Quo. Go back to what? Normal? You know, when you, I saw a tweet from someone the other day. I mean, I'm assuming we're all like vibing here. Yeah, okay. And if not, this is about to get real spicy. On Twitter, there's been a meme. I'm still on there, I know. The apocalypse. I'm like, why leave now? The house is on fire, and as it turns out, I can breathe smoke, I guess. There's been a meme going around with like different versions, but one of them was like, what is, like for progressive, for people who think of themselves on the left, what is a far right idea you actually kind of agree with, that you know would... And I just saw that, and I went, bad vibes, kept going. And then, like, a couple of hours later, someone quote retweeted it, right? They put their context on top of it, which is why I love Twitter, the sense of adding context. That's why he's trying to destroy it. This young black woman, I can't remember her name, she said, something I've learned is that if I find myself agreeing with someone on the right in that way, like if I felt that, like, I don't know, she was like, I've learned that I need to sit with some deep introspection. And every time I realize I've been proven, that that's a good instinct. And I've been just thinking about that. So nostalgia, because really what nostalgia is Make America Great Again. Like, we're supposed to move forward. We're supposed to acknowledge the past, learn from the past, but we're not supposed to go back there. It's going to cost us and many other people greatly. So nostalgia, just as a, like my mom, like even that, I go, okay, so what are you willing to give up? You're really going to like, what's that? Your mom had terrible health care. She was dying. Do you want your mom alive now for this? She had heart disease. She wasn't a good breather. She worked at Atlanta Airport. And that's actually the day I wrote that poem. I was like, oh my gosh, this is the first time in my life. The first time in my life, I was like, I do not want her here for this, So nostalgia, I've really had to, I get its comforts. Also, nostalgia, the original name for it was what doctors called PTSD for the first vets from World War I. If that's not a sign, like, what am I taking on?
What are you hanging on to?
What am I hanging on to? Hope. I think we need to figure this out. Like Toni Morrison talked about how like we've gotten really good culturally and artistically at making like evil villainy look sexy, look appealing and interesting. We love, who doesn't love Sula? I'm not saying she, but difficult women, difficult people we love. And then you're like, Nell. You know what I mean? And you have to grow into the wisdom to appreciate Nell. And Nell's strength. Who said you were the good one? That whole book, I think, journeys to her saying that to her dear friend, So I think hope, because I think, and this is very post-2008, I don't know, I think maybe this is a young person thing and I'm less young. It seems cheesy, it seems trite. What do you mean? How is that supposed? Hope? That's not health care. That's not food on the table. That's not child care. That's not reproductive justice. No, it's not. But how do we get to all of those things? How do you, and we've all like, how are you going to get out of bed in the morning knowing what you know? You're smart, you're wise, you're not new to the game, you're true to the game. Hope is what makes all of that possible. And there was far too long in my life maybe I'd be polite not to like literally roll my eyes, but I could see myself at different parts of my past sitting in the audience going, that's trite. He's just trying to sell a line. But yeah.
Okay,
Hope.
Thank you. You mentioned Toni Morrison, and I actually have a question.
Queen, legend.
Related to that. In your poem, Gravity, you write, I asked someone, how are you doing? And felt in the way her eyes fell, how I had failed her before I had even reached the end of my question. So similar to Morrison's Rememory, how do you manage re-grieving loss when so many of us keep asking you about it?
Well, I guess I could stop writing about it if I wanted people to stop asking, but probably not. I don't feel. It is an active rememory. I guess. One, people ask me about it because it's something people are experiencing, and they're bowled over by it, and it's happening in real time. I lost my dog a few months ago, and it's a different grief. It is different and volatile and painful. And you're like, am I really crying about a pet? Yes! Yes! And that's my right because I love that damn dog. You know what I mean? So it's honestly never occurred to me when someone's asked about grief, but like this again. Because, as long as we live and as long as we are lucky enough to live with meaning, the flip side of that is we're only, I think, going to learn new ways to, if not lose, at least care about the possibility of loss. And now I don't want to separate that. When you're young or when you're green or if you're, Tory Lanez, thank you. You say, I would rather not love I would rather not be a loving person to, you think, insulate yourself, right? I see far too many young people, but certainly far too many young men opting for that. It's too hard, but that's why, there are many reasons why Morrison's work, period, but also particularly in Beloved, rememory is essential. It's difficult, and sometimes it is painful.
Yeah. If you want to learn more about your dog, you can check him. You should read more of the stories on your Substack.
Yes.
Actually.
Yes. Yeah.
Which I appreciate it. Beautiful photos
you.
too.
Aw. Yeah.
So,
Did you have a question? Yes. Yeah.
Yes.
So first, I wanted to say how much I appreciated you saying that African Americans are like really culturally good, pretty. In December, my half brother died, and within 3 hours of me finding out, I had 2 cousins in Chicago and 1 in Detroit being like, "Hey, we going?" And it's like, because it's like a road trip to Mississippi, like we're going to go to Cleveland, we're going to pick you up, and it's like, it's ritual. When somebody dies, it's like, and then we go there, and we go to the funeral, and we scream, and we cry, and we go to a hotel together, we drink in the parking lot,
Yes.
hang out. And this is when we gather, this is when we can have our freak out together, and it is so comforting in its way.
Yes, and important. Lucille Clifton published, I think it's been reissued. She published, I thought I was very familiar with Lucille Clifton's work, but I hadn't heard about this memoir. It's called Generations. It's this little book, but it was reissued recently. I found it one of those days, I don't know if you're those days, you're so messed up. You go to a bookstore or a library, and you're so shook, you don't even know and you're just kind of wandering, and no book is, you're like, maybe this Nobel Prize will help me understand what, no, you just, and I just wandered to an unexpected, because I'm like, memoir, I got it. I walked right past that second, but for some reason, I went back over there, and this little book, and I pulled it out, and it was Lucille Clifton. In the book, one of my favorite sections is this kind of page-long section. It's about the road trip she's taking with her siblings to go to the funeral, or maybe to go to the house and a white man cuts them off, this car full, and they just laugh at him and laugh about him for the rest of the afternoon. It is such a joyous chapter. And I was like, that's it. I remember one of my aunties insisted in Memphis, my mom was still in the hospital, we're going in and out and checking on her in her coma. And someone was like, we're going to get manicures and we're getting mimosas. I was like, okay, and when you look back, it's almost like, did that happen? Was our love that joyous? How could, but it's true. Yeah, it's beautiful. That we need to keep. That we need to honor. I also just think, and again, this is American culture, I just think we're increasingly less good at checking in on each other later. You know what I mean? And I need to do this work too. You know what I mean? That, and actually, we're just going to be talking about Toni Morrison all night long, because but you see that in her work. People, 18th, 19th, 20th century Black Americans, the frequency with which people are checking in on each other, not always nicely. Milkman gets a whole name because of a neighbor being too nosy, but you're a part of something, you're a part of each other's lives. And that's why, again, to take it back to Beloved, when Setha and her family are abandoned, when they stop checking on her, that's when all hell breaks loose. It's not the ghost. It's not a damn ghost that shows up. It's the fact that the community has abandoned her with this ghost. And that's why when they all come together at the end of the book, I think it's so powerful. Yeah.
Yeah, that they banished the creek.
Yes, yeah.
So
Keep going, we're vibing now.
the question I wanted to ask, so your memoir, so the last section when you go to Spain,
Yes.
It's such a departure from the rest of the book, different cast of characters, different tone, literally different location, the pacing's all different. So I'm actually really glad to see you now, because since I read it, I don't know, a couple of years ago, I was like,
Yes.
I wonder what he was doing with that last section.
Yeah.
So can you kind of talk to me about how were you grappling with that?
Yes. Oh, this is a beautiful question. Thank you. And I love you. Because it's your attention to the craft choices too. And I agree. First of all, writing books, hard stuff, man. I recommend it, but also maybe I don't. It's hard, But landing the plane is even more difficult. And so with the memoir, I was like, Because the predicament I found myself in when so my mom passed away in 2011. I'm finishing the book in 2018, really. It was a long journey. And the book's titled How We Fight for Our Lives. From the title, it's clear that this is work in progress. That, I was like, it would be a betrayal. So one, I was like, it would be a betrayal to put a false sense of finality, I guess, sense of finality in this memoir, that I'm trying to encourage all of us that every day we're alive, we're fighting for our lives. That's the work, And so like a pat ending freaked me out. Also, obviously, I was beginning to realize that grief just changes, and it's, and so, yeah, I entered that murky period personally after my mom passed away. So yeah, there's a jump from, I make it back to New Jersey. I think it jumps from like June or July, a couple of months after my mom's passed away, to September later that year, when I started traveling. And I unexpectedly, because if you've been an experience with deep grief in particular, at least once you'll have an experience where you'll be minding your own business and you hit it off with someone that you have nothing in common in. You might have known them before and didn't like them. Just happened, just saying. But you like start vibing, you're like, what's going on? And then you keep talking, you find out you have a similar grief in common. I've heard that happening a lot. So I end up meeting this like white Canadian nurse from Ottawa. She's in her 80s. She walks way too fast. She refused to take taxis because she was like, I just keep walking. I was like, oh, people are just the worst. Oh my gosh, Esther, why are you dragging me all over Barcelona? I'd be like, there's another taxi, Esther. There's another taxi, Esther. I'm trying to be polite to this older woman. She's making me crazy. But she had like a fierce spirit. And so we kept spending time together. And she would, in fact, insist on it. And I was like, fine. And, and so the reason it's the end of the book is because I went to Barcelona specifically because I'm a writer. And I've learned that when I'm traveling, when people ask why I'm there, if I just say I'm a writer, they tend to leave me alone. And actually, this goes to your first question. I did not want to talk about grief. I was like, please don't talk about moms. Please do not set me up to like, and so I was like, I get to go to this place. I'll stay in a hostel. Also, what is this 80-year-old woman doing in a damn hostel? Anyway, it was all me, like 20-something Australians, because all those lawless people do is go on vacation. And then little Esther. But I intentionally wasn't talking to anyone, including Esther. We talked about everything. Didn't mention it all. Here to write. And then our last night, we go to dinner, and we're sitting out on this beautiful hill looking out the sunset. And I think she turns to me and she said, again, 80-year-old woman, my mom died recently. Like, Esther, no, my God! And so I just opened up. And so that felt perfect to me when I finally kind of stepped back. It took some weeks. And a lot of walks around. And once I left my apartment, I was living on 142nd Street, and I walked trying to think of the end of the book, and I looked up and I was on the Chelsea Piers. That's like 14th Street. I walked so much trying to think about it. But I was like, that's it. I was like, one, I like the idea of like kind of fast forwarding. I get to acknowledge I don't have wisdom, unfortunately, for the reader. Not really. And you get to literally see me blown off course. And I think I'm just lost. How lost could I be to be following this lady around, And then she was clearly the person on this planet I needed to meet, And that has to be enough, that revelation has to be enough. I wasn't ready to take it much further, or say we're all going to be okay, but that was it. Yeah. Thank you.
We're only going to take a few more questions because I want to make sure we have time for the book signing in the lobby.
Okay.
I saw your
hand back there. We can talk in the book signing line, too.
I saw your hand up there in the back. Yep.
Oh.
So your work has me thinking of a book that I recently read called The Smell of Rain on Dust, Grief and Praise.
Okay, who wrote that?
Martine Pritchett.
Okay.
And the whole point of the book is that grief and praise are sisters. And I just really was shaken about how all of these poems are very clearly about grief, but also clearly about praise. And I just wanted to share with you that something in the book that they talk about is that the first praise and the first grief song that you ever sing is when you're born. And you're both grieving the world that you're losing and the warmth. And you're also praising the new world that you're coming into, and that made me think of,
That's so beautiful. Okay, I'm gonna look for that. I do, and it makes me so happy because I do feel there's been part of it's like mental health. You're seeing more of that being acknowledged in the culture and in the art, but also grief being, I think, kind of taken more seriously. Yeah. I mean, this is simple. We can actually slide in maybe 3 questions. Because grief is an ode. That's what it is. You're celebrating. You wouldn't be so shook if you hadn't experienced and then lost something so magnificent, And I think and when it comes to the apocalypse in the world, I think you just go, oh, okay, you don't go, the world is ending and throw down your hands. You go, the world is ending and I care about this world. What can I get out there to do to save it? That's what you do.
Yeah. Thank you. I saw your hand too. I'm going to you. Yep.
It's very clear that you adore your mother. I'd like to know, what is it about today's world that you're most pleased that she did not have to experience?
Ooh, buddy. That's a beautiful question. Only you could ask that. Yeah, okay. Thank you, though. No, because I do think about that. So she asked, like, you clearly adored your mother. What about the world now are you so pleased that she does not have to kind of witness and experience? Oh gosh, how much time do you have?
That you didn't have to try to save her from.
Ooh. I mean, directly the pandemic. I mean, I don't think she would have survived. Just like geometry. It's like kind of do the math. She's living in the state of Georgia. She's already have this. She would have been working at the airport like as long as did it. I think, though, our country's response. Okay, so I will say because my mom worked for the airlines and because I was in high school, so I have a sense, and we talked about the news all the time, because I saw how my mom felt about 9/11 and the war on terror, and we were living in Texas, and the way she was like, are you kidding me? Like she read 3 newspapers a day. Like, she would just come home ready to talk about all of this. I think January 6th and the real-time rapid erasure of both literally what happened, but how it happened, why, I think she'd be texting me in the middle of the night. She'd be like, and another thing, rightfully so. But I think for those of us in the room, like particularly, I've been thinking about 9/11, the war on terror, and I think part of it's the 20th anniversary. We're seeing more thoughtfulness, but it really shakes you up. Everything wasn't sweet. I was in Texas for freedom fries. I'm not trying to be nostalgic about the USA that happened. But to see even making it to like the 9/11 hearings and to see just consistently people on all sides acknowledge something significant had happened. Just at base, something big had happened. It's scary, it impacted us. There are a lot of reasons why we got there and where we go next. People came at that in all kinds of ways from the political spectrum. Many people took advantage of it. But we can't even agree, right? We truly cannot get all the stakeholders in our country to agree that what happened on January 6th was a terrorist attack, it was a political coup, it didn't just happen, it was a coincidence, and we'll be dealing with the ramification for decades. And that would freak her out. And I'd be like, yeah, vibe, mood.
Can we please give a round of applause to Saeed Jones, please?
All right, keep that applause going. Thank you so much. Thank you. Thank you. Thank you. That was magnificent. Thank you so much to Saeed, to Stephanie, to Zach for being our MC tonight. My name is Tara. I am with the Anisfield-Wolf Book Awards. I want to thank you all for coming out tonight to hear tonight's reading. I want to make sure that I mention a couple of things before I let you all go to enjoy the food and the book signing and the book sales that are still going on in the lobby. First, I want to make sure that we invite you all to join us on Thursday for our sold-out awards ceremony. We do not have any more tickets, but you can watch the live stream at anisfieldwolf.org. And also, just wanted to mention as well, while we have you here and have your attention, most of our Cleveland Book Week author events are sold out, but we do have some tickets available for Saturday's event, which is going to be held at East Tech High School. featuring Matthew Delmont, who is our 2023 winner for nonfiction for the book Half American, the epic story of African Americans fighting World War II at home and abroad. If you come to that event on Saturday, you will have a delicious lunch prepared by East Tech culinary students, so I highly recommend that you come for that free event. And now I'm going to let you all go so we can transition to the book signing portion with Saeed and Stephanie outside in the lobby. Please take some food home if you like. I feel like we have a lot left over, and have some conversation in the book signing line. Thank you again for coming, and happy Cleveland Book Week.